The following is brought to you by the Starfleet Podcast Network, SPN, The Spin. I digress. If you get me out in the weeds, there's no coming back, basically.
So here's one for you then, just to pull us back from the brink with Big J.
Red alert.
I'm Big J with Beyond Trek Podcast. So welcome all. I am talking to Bill Krause. And I was looking at your Facebook page, just kind of get a sense of all the things that you do. And it looks like it's a lot. But the big thing is you design starships. And it looks like there's a lot of posters, computer graphic animations. Before I get to where I misquote or misspeak on something that you do or work on, could you tell us a little more about yourself and about your work that you do with Star Trek?
Sure. I'll try to sum it up as best as I can. I am right now retired from my professional job, which was as a videographer, editor of a video production company. I owned my own company in Cleveland for almost 40 years. And my model making and starship design had been my hobby for many years, but I only recently got into the hobby or back into it about 8 or 9 years ago, and started to just post things on social media of things that I'm working on, and eventually got noticed by Doug Drexler and other people within the Star Trek community and asked to contribute to like the Ships of the Line calendar and things like that, and people would actually then commission me to build the models of custom projects that I would be working on or design. And eventually, through that, got noticed through my friend John Eves, who had asked me to put together a portfolio of some of my work for Picard season 1. And then that didn't happen. And then season 2 rolled around, and they thought, well, we can use Bill Krause to design some or build some models. And that kind of steamrolled into season 3. And design ships that you saw on Picard, including the Titan, which becomes the Enterprise G, as well as the Intrepid. And that's where we are.
That is amazing. It had to have been, I can't imagine how it would have felt to get that call that you were going to be working on Star Trek Picard season 2 and 3 with the starship designs. And I've got to tell you, those were some good designs in that series. Those couple episodes. Now, did you have a lot to do with in season 2? We saw a lot of different ships, different classes of ships, ones that were had a design lineage from, example, the Excelsior class, and it was modernized to the 25th century, and so were some others. Now, did you have a hand in designing those ships that were seen on screen like that, trying to come up with a connection between the old look and the new one?
Not for season 2. That was still John Eves and Dave Blassett, the production designer, and Doug Drexler working on those ships. And I was only brought in late in that production to actually build the gold-plated radio room models of the 3 Stargazers. And at that point, they asked me to design a third predecessor to the original TNG Stargazer, which is my only contribution design-wise to that show. And it's only briefly seen in one episode for like a second in the dark from being, 50 feet away behind Jerry Ryan's head, and it's gone like that. But you can see, just ever so briefly, the Radiant class TOS version Stargazer. When season 3 rolled around, again, they asked me to build models, but not till later. Terry Metalis, the showrunner, had really liked my Shangri-La, which was a custom design ship I had built 8 years ago, just as my first kind of entry back into the hobby. I just kind of kit bashed this ship. It was kind of a motion picture era ship, and he wanted to buy that model, and I had sold it to another friend. So I was in the process of building another ship for himself, just as his own display model. It was between seasons 2 and 3. And then one day I get an email from Dave Blass saying, I hear you're working on this model for Terry. Can we see it mocked up with Picard era engines? And I happen to have a couple of extra engines from season 2 of the Stargazer. So I kind of photoshopped those in place on my Stargate or my Shangri-La. And then that next day, I get an email from Dave saying we're good to go on it. And I had no idea what that meant. But,
what does that mean?
Out that this was, what's this mean? And Terry had hinted that he liked the Shangri-La enough that he wanted to put it in the show. And I didn't really know what that meant. I just kind of assumed it was going to be like a prop, like behind somebody in the background.
Right. Something on the shelf or on the wall.
Right. Eventually it was, but he really wanted it to be the hero ship. And I found out that, that Sunday that it was the hero ship, and they wanted all the assets immediately to start getting that into production. And they asked for the 3D file of this model, which didn't exist. It was scratch built. I had built this by hand 8 years ago. I was using the same old molds to build him another one. There were no 3D files of it anywhere. So Doug actually had to come in and rebuild the model from photographs that I had sent to him. Because I had to leave that Monday to go work on another film. And they gave Doug a week to rebuild this model from photographs. And there was no second go around. There was like, go. So off it went to production, and there was no second pass. There was no revision. It was like, this is gone. This is off to win. So I was shocked that we didn't ever have a chance to kind of fine tune it and modify it or anything like that. But it was just, it needed, and I think Terry liked what he saw and had a vision for what that ship should have looked like. So he was happy with what Doug produced for him. When we did the Intrepid, later on, which I think you see it in one episode, in episode 5 of season 3, Terry again saw another model that I had been working on, and he and I just worked on this model back and forth via texting. I think it was on Instagram. I said, what do you think of this? He'll like that. Like, what do you think of that? So we just kind of convinced on this for a while. We spent more time on that ship than we did it all on the Titan, but that was a really fun process to actually be kind of working, knowing that this was going to be a ship on a show, and working with the executive producer, and nobody else involved, just him and I just, working on the design. So it was kind of fun.
I want to talk about the Titan real quick, because you mentioned that a couple times, and I'm thinking that there may be some others in the fandom that might have the same question. I know I've talked about it with some other fans, in that, so the first time we saw the Titan was in Star Trek Lower Decks. It was roughly the same design that was used on the cover of the Titan novels. So it more or less was the same. Now, that ship went from that, they called it a refit, which was radically different for the Titan A. Were you part of it? Could you kind of explain to us, if you can, why there was such a difference between the two? Was it something that you were tasked with designing a ship that was going to be renamed the Enterprise G? Did you know that ahead of time? And was that kind of the direction you were put in?
No, it was really Terry saw the Shangri-La and wanted that ship for the show. I had no idea it was to be a Titan or a predecessor or a successor of the Titan, or that it would be the Enterprise G. I had no idea of any of that. That was all pre-approved and selected by Terry. And in fact, I didn't even know it was going to be called the Titan until like a month later. And their flags were raised then. We're like, Dave and Doug and I were like, Titan, isn't that the same ship that was Riker's? And like, yeah, don't ask any questions. They just want to go with it. Okay. So, we had no say whatsoever in the evolution of it from a previous Titan, the naming of the ship, or anything. It was just like, we like this ship for what it looks like. We're calling it Titan, and we're going with it. No discussion. Okay. So I wasn't involved in any of that, other than giving them the ship, and then they went with it. So it was the end of my involvement at that point. We did go back and rewrote some of the backstory after the show had been, I think was either in trailer form or even premiere. We had to kind of answer some fan questions like you're asking here. So we had to go back and backpedal. So, all right, where'd the ship come from and why does it fit into this? So we were basically just kind of like reverse engineering why it's there and why it's named the Titan. And that's that story. So I don't have a definitive answer of how it evolved, but there wasn't any of that. There was nothing that was like, this is what we want. We're going to make it fit. And that's where I went with it.
Yeah. Now, how does that feel to see this ship on screen and have it be the main ship of that entire season? And not only that, but I'm speechless. I cannot imagine sitting there watching the show and seeing it's not just in the background. It's not something in the background. It's not over someone's right shoulder on the wall. It is the ship that is on the entire thing, and tell me what that feels like.
Yeah.
Hey, Renzo, how you doing? Hey, Bill, Renzo, Bill. Renzo's one of our co-hosts on Beyond Trek podcast. We were just talking about the Titan A, which would become the Enterprise G, and just Bill's feelings on seeing that on screen because it was a hero ship, not just something in the background. So I'm sorry, Bill, if you could go ahead and restart on that answer.
Right. It was just kind of an unreal feeling to know that they kind of deep dive into the fandom community and picked a ship that had been really out there for a couple of years and been kind of well known if you were into the model world of Star Trek, and to pick something that has been already established and used as the hero ship. It's like there was no evolution or a structured design for a specific ship. It was something that Terry saw, he liked it, he picked it out, Trey picked it out and said, let's use this ship. And I was just immensely honored to be even considered and asked to contribute. Then further asked to design other ships and then to build them for the as on-screen props you see behind the shoulder. So those gold-plated Titans behind them in the ready room, I built those. So again, doubly cool to see your ship flying around in visual effects and then see it on the wall as a physical gold-plated model. I mean, that's beyond cool.
So if we get Star Trek Legacy, which is the show that the fans, everyone is really hoping for, a spinoff to Picard, your ship is going to be the main ship of that series. So really, you've cemented yourself in that if it becomes a show. So you've pretty much cemented yourself in canon of Star Trek with your work.
Yeah, I think the legacy thing is really just something that either Terry or the fans had just made up.
Yes,
it doesn't exist officially in any form. It's just kind of like, this would be great if this happened. The fans kind of threw a name and logo on it, but it doesn't really exist. And I don't know if that'll ever happen, but I'd be thrilled if it does. But I think if Terry does another show, if he's given the keys, it may be like an anthology kind of series where we see a ship or a crew like for an episode or two, and it's somehow tied to another ship and crew from another era, but some other interwoven. I know for a fact that he loves the motion picture era. And if we do see something from Terry, it might take place, in the Kirk and Spock motion picture, late 2280s, 2290s sort of thing. And that'd be very cool.
So we'll get the pajamas, the pajama uniforms?
The muscle maroons.
Okay, good. So the Wrath of Khan era and forward. Right. Excellent.
Well, so I actually, long story short, my partner was at a convention where you were signing prints of your works, and he bought a few of them for my birthday. They made an excellent gift, so thanks for that. But from that, I asked him to ask you a couple questions while you guys were talking. And I wanted to now ask one of those questions to you myself, because you said that you didn't really have anything to say about it at the time, right? I was asking, since you seem to have like a huge penchant for designing ships in the TMP era, are there any gaps in the design lineages that you really just want to fill out yourself? Like, what was the Excelsior before the Excelsior? Or what was like the prototypical like Nebula before it was a Nebula? Was it the Miranda that led to the Nebula? Like, are there any designs in that era that you just really want to like flesh out for yourself? Because that's what you did with the Stargazer's Radiant class.
Yeah, I like to live in the eras of between the motion or the original series and the motion picture, and then that's sort of like where I've been stuck for a while, because I would have a lot of ships I wanted to kind of design, whether they're frigates or scouts and destroyers and heavy cruisers, medium cruisers, light cruisers, the whole gamut of ships. And I think I've kind of done enough in that era. And there's other eras, like there's the eras between the motion picture and TNG. They're like the Enterprise B and C era. There's like 75 years of ships that could be, designed. So, and even before that, even like the ships before Pike, between the NX-01 and the 1701, there was another 75 years or more even there. So lots of room to grow and play with, and to be now in the 24th century or even 25th century. It was just very odd, because it's like, whoa, what am I doing here? It's like, you're using my ships from motion picture, and we've kind of fixed them up a little bit. They're now living in the world of the late 24th, early 25th, but they're not quite what I would have imagined them to be, but that's where they are. So lots of playing room.
Yeah, I mean, is there any era then of either the lost era between TNG or before TNG and like Undiscovered Country or anywhere around there? Is there anything that you're trying to work on now? Anything that we should be excited for? I'm a huge ship nerd, so personally, I love finding your posts on Twitter and such, and like digging into them and reading up on history that people make up for them.
Well, the Intrepid that you saw in Picard season 3, that was based on my Wasp, which was a motion picture era, what I call it, interceptor, had the long stinger tail, which was based on another ship designed back in the 1980s. It was a fan-produced blueprint called the Hornet class by Larry Miller. And when I saw that way back, they went way back, like 9 years ago, I built my version of it called the Wasp and the Shangri-La together. And both those ships you see in Picard head-to-head as the Titan and Intrepid. But I am working on a TOS version, kind of filling the gap again, going backwards from Picard motion picture to a TOS version called the Tornado. It was actually something I've been working on when Terry saw it and said, hey, can you make this into a Picard era ship? So now it leaps forward another century to become the Intrepid. At that time, I had been calling it the Chaparral, and that name kind of stuck with the Intrepid throughout the production at Paramount, and eventually it became known as the Duderstadt class. But originally it was the Chaparral, which is what I had assigned it, and it was back and forth between that and a couple other names. So I renamed my TOS version the Tornado. So you'll be seeing that coming out probably later this year. I have a client who has actually commissioned me to flesh that out a little bit more further. So that will be seen as a pretty large scale, fully lit display model.
You're making it physically too. Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I remember the Wasp class. I also love the FASA era designs, and I remember that there was an Akiyazi class destroyer that this is very closely related to. But yeah,
which was actually that's a Mastercom Data ship. People think it's from FASA, but
is it? Okay.
If you saw, I forgot
still FASA era at least.
Yeah, late 80s, mid 90s. Yeah,
I had some of those FASA ships. Not the one you're talking about, but I want to ask you a little more about that ship. Is the first impression that I got when I saw that is it felt like this is not very Starfleet-ish. It had such a kind of a design departure, not so much a departure, but it was not quite what I expected seeing a Starfleet ship. So, and you designed this, the original, foundation of it for the motion picture era of ships. So going back to that, there weren't really a lot of Starfleet ships shown on screen. There was a Constitution class, and if you're talking about doing this before Wrath of Khan, you had the refit Constitution, and that was it. So seeing that we had basically only seen one ship in its refit version, what took you in that direction to design it to look like a Wasp?
Well, I think, like you say, you never really saw very many ships of that era. You only saw the Enterprise, and then eventually the Reliant, and then again maybe the Excelsior and the Grissom, and they all have slightly different looks. I just wanted to kind of fill out that aesthetic with ships that don't all look exactly the same. We're using the same components over and over again. In fact, even the Reliant is just a rehash of Enterprise components. And I wanted to see something to really stretch that envelope and see different things. And of course, the Wasp itself is based on, like I said, the fan design by Larry Miller. And so I basically just kind of redid his design and my take of it because I thought it was an unusual design and it looked very cool. And I just wanted to build it for fun. And didn't really think much about it until Terry saw it. And I think he saw that design as something that looks menacing. It looks like an insect, something that's, looks dangerous.
It did. When that nacelle was on fire and it was just kind of slowly coming up above the Titan. Yeah, looked pretty menacing.
CGI work there for sure.
The design itself, I think, is fairly basic. I mean, I've always looked at it like it's the Federation ship, and people like look at it and go, "Oh my God, it's so different." I go, like, where? I mean, it's got the stinger that comes down with a pod that's very similar to most secondary hulls. It doesn't go back like the standard Enterprise does or other refits, but it's got the same round saucer. It's got 2 pylons. It's got 2 engines. It's got the bridge. Looks just like every other Starship, except it's got a pod spin below a very heavy-duty pylon. Why that is offensive to some people, I don't know why, but it's another Federation ship. And in fact, if you see, I think in Stranger Worlds, they have a ship that looks very similar to the configuration of the Wasp and Intrepid too. So it's just another design.
No, Bill, I agree with you, especially if you look at the post that you put up about the Tornado, the Wasp, the Chaparral, etc. You can really see a design history for that, and it makes sense. Starting with the Tornado in particular, you can really see how, it's really just like the front half of an engineering section turned into a pod, and it's just a little underslung. I think that it looks incredibly Starfleet. I don't understand the objections to it generally. I think that all of this lineage is a pretty beautiful design. In particular, I think that the Enterprise era reconnaissance ship is perfect for its era too. I think that looks beautiful. So,
yeah, I mean, really, the pod and the Stinger, it's really a jet engine. Mm-hmm. If you ever looked out of your window of an airplane and saw the jet engine spinning below the wing with the wing, the pylon, that's the pod. That's basically just a jet engine hanging off the wing. It's the same kind of thing. I just made it into a much larger jet engine, but that was the essential inspiration for it originally.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of them generally. I think that taking some steps to vary Starfleet's designs makes sense. Like when we first saw the Akira era ships, the Norway Akira, Saber, Steamrunner, all those were very novel designs. We'd seen nothing like them from Starfleet before, right? Some people drew some comparisons between the Steamrunner and the Miranda, but even that's pretty bunk. But generally, they were just a departure from what we'd seen. And now we've seen those designs for the last 20 years or so, and they're pretty down pat. We've seen many variations on them. Games design variations around them, too. It just takes time for, Trekkies to accept that sometimes change is necessary. You've seen this over the years for sure.
Oh, for sure. Even the Shangri-La itself, when that first came out, when I designed that, people didn't like the cutouts on the primary hull. And that took a long time for people to kind of get used to seeing that. I eventually filled that in a little bit more. In fact, when I did that for Terry, when I built his model, the Shangri-La, I actually took another step from my original Shangri-La and made improvements on it for his model, which then became part of the Titan via that process. So just to kind of change up the primary hull and the silhouette and the shape of the hull. I think on the Shangri-La 2, it had a cutout even in the front where I had a triple bow-mounted photon array. They did use that for the Titan, but the winglets are there. The very big extended kind of impulse deck, very much similar to what was on the Shangri-La.
Have you
the secondary hull, which is
sorry,
I was going to say real quickly.
Go ahead.
The secondary hull, which is really just sculpture. When I built the Shangri-La, I actually just sculpted urethane foam and just shaped it by hand and molded it out of resin, as well as with the dorsal. So it was all, to me, very much sculpture at the time, looking for things that just looked cool from every angle. But they get kind of another take on an Excelsior or refit kind of hull. That's basically it.
So here's a question about your process, I guess. Do you find yourself mostly doing your design work on paper first, then you draw things out, then you translate it to digital formats, and then you make a physical version? Or like you just said, did you just get struck with inspiration and carve it by hand out of material? Like, what's more typical for you?
Yeah, I would start with a sketch. And back then when I was doing the Shangri-La, I didn't have a digital process yet. That was still pretty, I don't think 3D printers even existed then, but I was kind of doing an old school where I was actually carving a master out of foam and going to a hard, like, or silicone mold, and then casting a resin part out of it. Now I would do it possibly for smaller parts, but it's more of a process where I'm sketching, going into a digital 3D model of it, and then it is 3D printed. I lose that tactile feeling of shaping things with your hands. You're now doing it with a mouse and your keypad, and it doesn't feel as organic that way, but you can kind of get there. But once you get the 3D finished part, you have some more room to kind of fine tune it a little bit by hand if you wanted to. I enjoy it. I think I enjoy that more. But I think the bodywork is my favorite part of the model building process. Is to really see it kind of all flowing together and making it feel like like one cohesive kind of ship rather than just separate components that just glued together.
Do you find yourself with the 3D printing part that you're doing more revisions than what you did? Obviously, you're probably able to do more revisions of your design work, but has that become, I guess, a burden, setting yourself back because now you have the ability to keep doing these revisions over and over, which is in direct contrast to what you talked about earlier, that there was one chance, one shot of designing this ship and getting it out. There was no second pass.
Yeah, like, do you fall into the trap of perfection? Like, I've got to get it perfect and keep adjusting forever rather than settling for good or good enough?
I do settle for what I think needs to get done in the time frame that I've given myself to build them. Because I've got so many ideas that I know I can spend forever just on one idea, but there's so many of them that I just save them for the next project. So I get to a point where I think it's met most of my goals design-wise, and then I just get in production. I just have to build it, because it's really the goal for me is to see it physically in front of me, whether I like it 100% or not. It's just I need to get it out there. And if there's something that I don't like about it, I may tweak that a little later on while it's in production. But as you're designing it, you kind of get the base is covered, and then worry about sweating the details a little later. But there's so many ideas that I have that I just I will save every iteration of a model as I'm working digitally, because you can save a version. And so, maybe I'll try something different, but make a copy of it, make that change on that model. So I end up with like probably 50 variations of, a concept. And I may go back to revisit some of those concepts and then evolve that into another model. So nothing's gone to waste. I always try to save everything that I can, but you can't run into the problem where you've got, gosh, I could do this and this and this and this and this. And you get to kind of draw the line and say, okay, we need to get this thing done, in a timely fashion. So you put limits on yourself to what you can do and try to get done, for sure. No,
I totally can relate to the concept of having to get something out of your brain just because it's been stuck there, right? And trying to get it working. This is a bit of a story, but I'll tell it. I am a child of AOL. That was what I spent a lot of my childhood on. And there were a ton of AOL forums and boards where people would post their custom ship designs, right? I fell in love with the art of one particular artist. His name was Alpha Jack. I have no idea what's happened to the guy, but he'd put out these awesome designs in the TNG era, and all of his works, as far as I can tell, are lost to the times of the internet. Can't find them anywhere. I had printouts of them from that era, but that book got lost in a move kind of thing. But for the last 7 or 8 years now, I've had was it Victorious or Glorious or Fear? It was something Eos, and it was cool. But I remember what the design was, and I remember what the ship's purpose was, because he would tell stories as the ship was being constructed and the whole thing. It's bothered me for so long at this point that 3 months ago, I found an artist, commissioned them to be I'm just going to word vomit this out at you, and we're just going to try and make this work so at least it exists again, because it's been bugging me in my head that this was this cool design that I want back out there, right? So I totally understand the whole I've just got to get it out because it's bothering me that I can't get it out.
Right. Yeah, I will save. I'll go through the internet, things that inspire me, whether it's other shipbuilders or cars or airplanes or any kind of vehicle, and I just save this reference stuff and folders and just as fodder, to you try to absorb it all, and like you're hoping by some kind of osmosis that it just soaks into your brain. You can just spread it back out as, what you're hoping. It's all kind of like a sum of all these things.
Yeah, I was 10 or 11 years old at most. I don't have like a saved file. Like I didn't save images at the time. I just printed them out thinking that, I'll keep the paper and I won't lose the binder that I kept nope, that binder's gone. So there was this really cool story about this ship being assembled at the Titan yards because Utopia Planitia was overburdened with war building for the Dominion War. This was during like Deep Space Nine's 4th or 5th season. This ship was meant to serve as like a landing helicopter equivalent, like a LHD equivalent. So it had like well areas for landing crafts to settle on a planet that could be repurposed as mobile field hospitals or mobile barracks, that kind of thing. Just drop them off and the ship moves on kind of thing. That's the whole design. It had this cool like nebula-ish design. And I've got the whole thing in works to recreate it, so I'm excited for it to be done, so I can like show the internet this thing that's been lost for the last 20 years that I thought was really awesome.
There's going to be some kind of expedition dig somewhere far in the future, and that book will be found that you lost. It will be somewhere in some kind of archaeological project or something like that.
I can only hope so.
Bill, has there been... I'm sorry, go ahead, Renzo.
No. I was just going to add one last little detail that I remember about it. He talked about how when you were bringing together the two halves of the saucer, the skeleton for it, they were like brought down. It's being pushed by work bees. So he called it the dance of the work bees in his little description. And that little phrase has stuck with me. It's like little cool world building aspects that people come up with when they talk about these designs that they've made. I just wish we as a community preserved them all better. Right? Because I failed at that, so I'm hoping we as a group can get better.
I think they are.
Has there...
At least I try.
Good. Bill, has there been any design that you worked on, finished, did, it's out there, that still bothers you, that I wish I would have done this, or I wish I could do this, but I cannot go back and change it because it's locked in? Like, for example... The Titan A, which became the Enterprise G, that unless there's something written in canon and the story that it had to change some kind of look or design, that's it. That's in there. And anything in your head is just like, well, I wish I could have done this one thing, but it's possible that I never will be able to. Is there anything like that with any of your designs that were used, that were published, that kind of keeps you awake a little bit? Like, I wish I could fix this, or I would have done this one part differently.
Not anymore. I think because I recycle so many ideas into the next ship that I kind of work those Jones out. If I feel like I didn't quite finish a ship to my satisfaction, the next one, I will do that or make that kind of change into the next one in some way. So I always feel like I'm working those things out one ship at a time. Things I look back on in the past, like they're out there, and I just have to be happy and satisfied with them, and not dwell on them. But I did have concept designs for the Titan had we given more time to develop it, and I sketched out a bunch of things, thinking that we would have more of a collaboration with ideas, and of course that never happened. But with the Titan, when they asked that for that ship to be kind of when I found out it was going to be a 24th century ship, or even 25th century ship, I had some very outrageous ideas of making it very streamlined, not realizing that they really wanted to keep that motion picture aesthetic. And of course, when Doug built it, he used an existing refit primary hull, which is what I used in the Shangri-La. But I thought, well, can't we change that a little bit? I mean, sure, it's a saucer, but can we just change the profile just a little bit so it doesn't look obviously like we've taken the refit hull, which we did. But little things like that could have easily made that ship feel more period rather than looking, like it does. And I had sketched out some very easy ideas. I thought of just kind of streamlining the impulse engines, which I thought were very, very boxy in the Titan. I thought, well, we could really just, rounded them off, streamlined them, done a whole bunch of things. And so I was sketching out all sorts of ideas in my hotel room when I was in Denver, while Doug was working on it. I'm thinking, okay, here's my first round pass, here's my second round pass, and like, no, we're good to go. I'm like, oh, so I just kind of shuffled them back into a file folder and there they sit. So I don't know if I'll ever build a version of it that I've sketched up, but I had, prior to Picard season 3, I had worked on designs for a Shangri-La that might have existed in the Enterprise C era. So those were already was already on the drawing board for a future project before Picard came along. So I may still do that. It may disrupt the Shangri-La to Titan history legacy because it's a ship that I'm inserting between those two. But hey, it's my canon. I can do whatever I want with it, right?
Absolutely. Right. And based on what you were saying, it really does sound like Doug Drexler, Dave Blass, and Terry Matalas are all like big fans of that TMP era design language. And I think that they really spoke through the character of Jack Crusher in season 3 as well. There's that like scene where they're admiring the ships at the Fleet Museum and he goes, I'm a Constitution man myself, that thing. Right. So yeah, there's definitely some self-insert there. I did have a question for you about how you design certain practical functions of a ship, right? So when you're talking about 24th century designs, Galaxy and such, you've got those big wide phaser strips that cover the top and bottom of the saucer kind of thing, right? You tend to work more in the TMP era where they've got those ball turrets, right? Do you like plan out where you're placing those in advance, or do you just do that as like more of towards an afterthought just to make sure you get your 360 coverage kind of thing?
Yeah, those are, you talk about turrets in a ship. When you're working in 3D, you can spin that model and every axis, you can see a line of sight from phaser emplacements where you think the blind spots are, and make sure you've got enough coverage and kind of just drop them in where you think they should go. But there's always a big blind spot along both sides of the nacelles, and there's no way you can avoid that unless you put phasers on the outside, upward sides of the nacelles. And no one's ever done that, and I think it looks silly. But you can't cover the ship 360, but you can get pretty close. And I think in every design, you just can't get around the fact that those nacelles are in the way of any kind of phaser arc, unless you got, a very tall ship and you can, kind of shoot around the nacelles, but typically they're not that tall.
Yeah, maybe some of the 20 or 31st century ones from Discovery might be able to shoot around their nacelles with their moving nacelle pieces and such, but yeah, for most typical Star Trek ships, that seems like a strong limitation.
Well, now they can just detach them and put them over there. Just put them all the way over there so that we can cover all of our blind spots. Well, no, that probably wouldn't be the best idea, because then they could get, even if they were targeted, they're further away, you could protect them that way. But, I digress. If you get me out in the weeds, there's no coming back, basically.
So here's one for you then, just to pull us back from the brink with Big J. So the Sagan class, right? Designed not by yourself, but it's one that you I'm sure have looked at, right? And you know that in the third season, they had the Echelon class, which essentially sheared off the bottom two nacelles and made it a two nacelle variant, right? What do you think about the kit bashing culture that still continues in Trek? Is that something that you enjoy seeing? Because personally, I love it. I love it when they take like parts of an old design and reuse them in something new, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's just the economy of visual effects. And the reason that the Echelon became a two-engine ship was because each effects house has their own models of ships they can use for the show. And if they're tasked to use a ship in the show, they got to look what they have in their inventory. And we've got the assets for the Sagan, we got assets for this ship and that ship. What can we do to make another ship? Because to build a visual effects ship is like $20,000-$30,000, and they don't have that kind of money. So they simply just snapped off 2 inches off the Sagan, boom, we got Echelon, and that's how that became the Echelon. I'm sure Starfleet was the same way.
Yeah. Not all that different from the TNG era when they had to come up with the graveyard fleet for Wolf 359, right? It was like, go buy some model kits from the store and we'll put them together and blowtorch them. So, yeah. Yeah,
whether it's digital or a physical model, it's still the asset that costs money, and everything's about money in Hollywood. So that's what you have on hand, what you can use right away without having to go back and design something, because that takes a lot of work and manpower to have to design a ship, build it, light it, texture it, animate, all that stuff. It takes way too much time.
Yeah, and they have to make some variety to them, or you end up with the fleet from the end of Picard season 1, which was endlessly lambasted by the internet and fans. It looked bad.
And they didn't want to do that.
Right. So are there any times where you've had like a scene where you wish that they had more variety, other than the aforementioned Picard ending? Like anything that you've seen in recent Trek where you're like, it doesn't make sense for that to be another ship of the same class, that kind of thing?
Well, I think it really was the original series, and the fact that they always used the same model over and over again for every ship. And I always wanted to see other ships, which was why I got into model making at all, was because I wanted to build a Starfleet of variety and not the same constitution over and over and over again. It was just a different number. And I wanted to see if the Enterprise was a heavy cruiser, I wanted to see medium cruisers, light cruisers, regular cruisers, destroyers, scouts, the rest of the fleet and their crews, and not the same, constitution over and over and over again.
I would have loved to have seen your version then of the Ultimate Computer, right? Because that's the episode where I think it's most blatant that, they only have the one model, don't they? So.
Well, if you see I rebuilt or I redesigned the hood and the Excalibur from that episode for clients as slightly reimagined as if they've been refitted after that event and the damage they had incurred from that encounter. So you'll see slightly different versions of the Constitution prior to the motion picture refit with the kind of like a blend of TMP and TOS stuff. So if you have a chance to look at things I posted on the hood and Excalibur,
absolutely, those are my takes. And find them.
Yes, but actually, my header on Facebook is the Excalibur. If you want to look on that really quick, but
absolutely,
I want to talk about that real quick. The ending of Picard season 1, and there are a lot of different ship classes, Bill, that you have worked on. You like having that variety, all the different looks and designs. For me personally, and I think I'm in the minority, I saw the point. I get the point of the end of Picard season 1, and I'm not against it. I think that it's a good idea. And the reason I think that it's probably more efficient to have a couple classes of ships, and that's it. You're designing a bulk of 1 or 2 or 3, and that's it. And the reason I think that that's a good idea is because let's just say that you have a crew that has found themselves unexpectedly on another ship. They had to get beamed over in some emergency. It's in the middle of a battle, whatever it is. If you only have a couple different classes, then you can jump right in. You know where things are. You know what the buttons do. You have the layout, all of that. It's kind of like if you go from car to car to car and it's the same make and model, then that's easy. As soon as you jump into another one, I don't know about you, but I have a hard time finding the windshield wipers and some of the other things. And I think in some situations, you don't have time. You won't have time to find these different things. And for me, and I know I'm in the minority on this, I think there are too many classes of ships. I think Starfleet had gotten to a point where they were just having fun with it. Like, let's just do as many different things and variations as we can. And in your work, do you ever feel like, yes, maybe we are getting too much into all these different and various looks when it may be more efficient as a military at that time to have just a few classes?
I mean, it's up to the producer and what they feel Starfleet should be focused on, and like what you're saying makes perfect sense. That it makes sense to have a fleet of all the same ship in terms of production and familiarity with the function of the ship and operation. As a Starship designer, I say no. I mean, I want to create something new all the time, and I think with the creativity of just myself and other people, we like to imagine our own versions of ships and our universe, and to build the same thing over and over again, saying, okay, this is what the ship's going to look like from now and forever. Never change it. And like the designer me is like, no, I want to see something else. That's why you don't have everyone not driving the exact same car. Everyone wants to have their own personal take on what they look like in their car and their vehicle and they drive and all that stuff. But But yeah, as time goes on, the technology evolves and changes. So there's always going to be an evolution of Starship. It's not going to be the same ship, just refitted over and over and over again, every 2 weeks, every year, whatever it is. And each ship perhaps should have some sort of specialized role. I mean, a lot of ships, you can look at it as being a multi-mission, and they just do everything. It's basically it's a starship that takes you from point A to point B with people on board. Either you're helping some humanitarian mission in deep space, or exploring strange new worlds, or you're in a battle against some sort of domestic terrorist or whatever. These ships have to really do everything all the time. It really isn't like a dedicated battleship or a dedicated explorer ship. These ships do everything all the time, depending on what they're tasked to do at that specific time, because they're all going to have weapons. They're all going to have a shuttle bay. They're all going to have warp engines. So they're all pretty much going to do the same thing. It's just how they look like. I mean, again, like a designer, I like to see, try something new. Doesn't mean the insides don't have to all be the same. I mean, they're all going to have the same kind of windshield wiper button and phaser button, so that I think functionality is going to probably be the same within the ship. They're going to have the same transporter pads and medical bays and command chairs and all that kind of stuff. But the outside of the ship can be really whatever. The sky's the limit. I mean, I think in like a modern, or not modern, but a futurist view of technology and being able to print on demand whatever you think of. Just press a button. You can basically just materialize out of raw matter whatever it is you're thinking of, whatever the designer has in mind. Boom, there it is. You're not welding beams together and bolting on plates. Basically, it's a gigantic computer printer. Just prints this machine that prints out a Starship on demand whenever you want it, or dematerialize it back in the raw matter and start over again. You do that on board the ship for food and clothing and everything else, but on a much larger scale, you can probably produce ships in the same fashion. Which is probably why they have
on the Protostar. Like in Prodigy, we at least saw the printing of shuttles and landing crafts and such. So, I mean, the underpinnings for that's definitely there.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
But Big J, just another couple points for you.
I'm a little nervous because I saw that look in your face like Big J's about to get dunked on.
I started typing.
God, no. What did I do?
One cross training, right? Like this is something the real military does. If you're a weapons officer on like an Arleigh Burke destroyer, you're going to know how to fire things on a Ticonderoga, because the software systems, while they might be slightly different versions, are still interoperable. So you're going to be able to do things, which is exactly what Bill was saying. The insides that matter are still going to be interoperable, right? So that part I think is pretty big. The second one, though, is you're talking about like if you had like a crew that got beamed over in an emergency to a ship, they can't help because they don't know where things are. That's fair, but these are adults that are competent. They should be able to look up a diagram and see where can I go help, if they're even needed to help, right? Because you don't want two chief engineers in engineering yelling out contradictory orders. Only one of them is actually the chief engineer of the ship. If you're on an emergency situation like that, your best bet may just be to get out of the way and let the actual crew do their job, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I think the best point, though, is one that Bill already made, which is the specialized needs of ships. An Oberth class is a very different mission profile than the Galaxy class, so they have to be different. You're going to leave an Oberth class studying a star for a couple months, and that's just what they're doing. Crew of like 60, whatever, leave them alone. That's what they're doing. You're not going to waste the time of Galaxy class doing that. So you can't just have Galaxy classes, and you can't just have Oberths. You've got to have variety.
True, but we saw an Oberth class get one-shot murked in a movie, which is like,
emergencies happen.
Yeah, emergencies. Polite way of saying shit happens.
Yeah, I mean, here's another one for you, though. Weaknesses.
Yeah.
Remember during the Dominion War when the Breen entered the situation and every ship in Starfleet shields became useless and the ships were all getting disabled and such?
Yep.
Remember how one Klingon bird of prey got lucky that they'd done some unstandard modification to their shields and it survived everything else? Same thing. If you make every ship identical and they all have the same parts and the same designs and the same settings, you are more likely to get caught like that. Variety breeds resiliency.
Okay.
So having specialized in different ships like that just gives you better shots at not getting owned that way.
Right. So, that's a good point.
And then the last one is just tech advances, which Bill also mentioned too. It was just like the Excelsior class was the premier like heavy battle cruiser of its time. The Klingons are terrified of it during Undiscovered Country, right? But by the time of Next Gen, It's an 80-year-old design. It's kind of just there to transport around admirals and other dignitaries, right?
Yep.
But it's still useful. It's still big. It's still got crew. It's still got equipment. So it's going to move down in its necessity, but it's going to still be there. You're not just going to throw them out.
They had a bunch of those in the Dominion War. Yeah, they were pulling everything out for that. So you make a good point. You're right. I think there can be something said about the simplicity, but also you could leave yourself open to you've got an entire fleet of one or two class of ship, and they all have the same flaw. Well, not so much flaw, but they all have that vulnerability, like the Breen exploited. Now, what do you do?
The bird of prey from Generations. Remember the one that we all hate, the one that had that flaw in its cloaking device, the magnetic coil or some shit, right?
Yeah,
that was a flaw that got exploited.
Defective plasma coil. Yeah,
that's what it was. Yeah, they all had the same flaw, so they all got retired, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you had all of your ships as the same thing, you can't just retire your whole fleet at once. You've got to have variety.
That's a good point. Yeah. See, I like hearing from Renzo. I really do. It's a treat because everything you say makes sense.
I try. And I'm sorry for being so long-winded, Bill. This is more about you than me. I just wanted to give listeners some response to Big J's beef here.
It's totally fine. I'm not the best at explaining things or explaining my own ideas, but, I try.
Do you have anything that you're working on now that you're aware of that may be used in something that's upcoming?
No, as you know, the strike going on, there's nothing in production right now. And
I don't even think you could talk about anything that you might be working on because of the strike. Yeah. Yeah,
I'm not working on anything for the future. Nothing that they've contacted me to do.
In your free time, do you just keep sharp by just
what free time?
Crafting, drafting. True, right?
Got missions to make.
My job working on Starships is 24/7. I am in the shop every day, or at the computer making posters or compositions for whatever. I'm like calendars coming up again for 2025. And then these posters I've been doing, I really just did them for my convention appearances, which I've been doing now recently. And they asked me to bring something along with me so I can sign. So I started producing these posters. And so I took them to a few conventions and I had some extra. So I brought them back home and I put them up for sale on Twitter and other social media sites. And they're just going like crazy. So I had to reorder 4 times. I just wanted to get rid of my stock, but now I've been selling these things like crazy. You got one of the original.
No way.
I've got quite a lot of them, actually.
Was that your friend who was at the Station Unity in DC?
Yeah, that was Alex, my boyfriend. He was the one who was for my birthday, and he just got me a whole stack of these, and these are lovely. I'm going to get them framed.
Oh, wow.
One of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is unbelievable.
There's 4 new ones, too, I've just come out with.
Oh, that's exciting. I'll have to keep an eye for if you come back. I was just working that day. I wanted to go myself, but I was just trapped. But yeah, I love these posters. They're lovely. I'm going to get them framed and put up, probably alongside that one too.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. As far as you know, is there any sort of taboo subject when it comes to the building of ships for the community? Because that's always something I've wondered. I've not seen some kinds of designs that I would have expected, right? I've never seen a patrol boat equivalent, right?
No. I mean, taboo meaning
just something that designers just don't bother to produce. Yeah, something that designers just don't bother to produce for fan producers don't bother to touch when it comes to making ships for Trek. If you look at the video games, we'll always see an artillery ship, or we'll see a scout ship, but we don't really see some of the more niche things, like a Q ship, right, from the World War I and II era. Something that's stealthy but Starfleet, but when you attack it, it kicks your butt, that kind of thing. Just some designs that are just lacking. I've always wondered if there's a taboo against it.
Not that I know. I mean, I try to work both ends of the spectrum by making something small, like I've done a shuttlecraft and I've done a scout ship and a crew of 11 and something as big as the Endurance, which is my biggest ship. So, and everything in between. So I'm trying to fill in as much as I can before moving on to doing Romulan, which I've never done, or Klingon, because I've been so focused on Starfleet and Starfleet vessels that I haven't even touched any of the other races.
Would that be overkill? Do you think that'd be too much to jump into doing Romulan or Klingon or other fleets ships, other Empire ships?
Overkill for me or for
you? Like, because you spend all of this time, you have all this time and expertise put in towards the Starfleet ships. Do you feel that you're at that point where it's kind of, this is where I'm at, this is the silo I'm in, it's too late for me to try to design anything non-Starfleet?
Yeah, I think I've run into that wall where it's like, I think I've done all the ideas that I think I wanted to do, at least for the two areas that I've been working mostly in, the TOS and TMP, where maybe I just work in, like, just backing up and going back to TOS, but from a Romulan or Klingon perspective, and just filling out those fleets. Like, we've overseen, like, the Klingon D7. I know there are other Klingon ships, and I don't know a lot about them, but kind of filling in some of those blanks too. And even in the Romulan ships of the motion picture era, we've never seen. So those are things that, I want to build the ships that are in those places where people haven't looked a lot, and try to imagine something that might be there. This is using bookends like whatever the last Romulan ship we've seen from TNG and the last one we've seen in TOS, and I think there's really nothing in between. So there's a lot of playing room there too.
Yeah, I think that actually brings up one of the things that bugged me most about, at least in the new era of Trek designs. So the Klingons in Discovery, the first two seasons, right? Their physical appearance you can explain away with genetic engineering, and that can be something that takes no time at all. We've seen that in Enterprise and such. But the design lineages and the changes on the appearances of their ships, that's not something that can just be changed overnight in that era or basically ever, right? Like, design lineages that we saw in Enterprise made sense when it continued into TNG and past, but the Discovery anomaly there were just so weird. What did you think about all that?
Yeah, it's just like one of those blips in the timeline. It's like, what universe are we really in? And this doesn't match up either end to what we know in an established universe. So we have to basically just assume it's another multi-universe kind of thing and just let it go at that and not try to fit it in. And so you can either continue doing that same thing with your look, or if you're a fan designer and trying to incorporate that or try to explain that in some way, or blending that in with what's been established, or ignore it completely and just go your own way with it. So, I mean, there's just so much out there to play with. To try to fit it all together, you go crazy. If you have that kind of OCD where you got to make everything fit, you'll just drive yourself crazy. Or if you just be more selective about what you do like, and then perpetuate that kind of fondness into your own art, because Star Trek should inspire you, and like it inspires me, to create, whether it be artwork, fiction, your own science fiction. There's so much there to just springboard off of. You shouldn't just dwell on trying to fix it all so it fits your vision of what Star Trek is, because in everyone's head, Star Trek is completely different and it may not fit your vision of it. So I never try to make things fit. I try to make them fit in my head. I don't expect people to like it or, fit their like of Star Trek. So all you can do is just take what you like from Star Trek, ball it all up, and roll out your own ball of it, and hopefully someone else will enjoy it and inspire them to do things. So,
I think that's what the producers of Discovery season 2 actually ended up settling on, because they went back to that classic D7 arrangement of ships, and that's what we've seen in Strange New Worlds now as well. Like, we haven't seen any more of the crazy insectile-looking Klingon ships from the first season. They've just kind of been phased out, which is probably for the best.
I think it looked like they just went out of their way to be different. Like, we just want to do whatever we can to be different. And in regards to the ships, I didn't have a problem with it until they named off one of those new ships the same class as what we damn well know is not anything close to what it looks like, the D7. And in regards to the look of the Klingons, I like talking about this because this is something that will be a part of Star Trek and discussions forever. I personally don't see the problem with the Klingons in season 1 of Discovery. Here's why I say that. And I had an interview with another gentleman about this the other day, and they did not, if they would have had Worf or anyone already established in season 1 of Discovery and then say, this is who they are, that's it. I could not have gone with you on that, could not have followed that. But as humans, as a race, we have so many different looks and variations of us. Just with, you've got North American, South Americans, Asians, African, all a plethora of, we are certainly not a homogenous looking, right. We're not a monoculture. Why is it? And I know this is completely off the subject of starships, but I want to get your guys' opinion on this. Why do people have such a problem with the Klingons when they know that there are members of Earth, humans, that the same argument could be made that, let's say you spend a majority of your time looking at humans that look like me. And then suddenly you've got humans that look like Renzo. All right. That's readily accepted. Like, yeah, of course, duh. But we somehow cannot accept that the Klingons could have just as wild variants of looks as we do. We have that. It's okay. We know that. We acknowledge that. But when it comes to the Klingons, like, oh, no. We can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest objection the fandom has is the fact that we got an explanation for why the TOS Klingons did not look like the TMP and ON Klingons. We got that in the form of an Enterprise little storyline that talked about genetic engineering, and that explained why they looked more humanish, right? And that was a decent explanation that, like, gave us verisimilitude there, right? But the change that was done for the Discovery ones hasn't just been like we're seeing multiple types of Klingons. No, we're only seeing the new kind. If in the scenes that they had done for the first season of Disco, they had used a mixture of the TOS era looking Klingons and of the Enterprise looking Klingons, I think that would have gone over really well, in fact, right? But they didn't do that. They instead went with a third new variety, which I happen to agree with most people on this one, that I don't think they looked very Klingon. And it wasn't just their facial appearance, it was also their armor, their accoutrements, their ships, their gear, everything just looked like it was a new race. Mm-hmm. They could have waved that away by explaining it as being like, oh, these are just Klingons that come from a specific religious sect that we're seeing. But then they brought in the whole Klingon, like, High Council in a scene, and they all looked the same, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they specifically made it look like this was the only kind of Klingon of that era. And that's kind of problematic because it doesn't make sense that they have never been registered as looking like Klingons like that before or after. So I think what you said before is true with regards to the Klingon fleet, as it was for the Klingon people in this. They just wanted to look different. You can see the design elements that they brought into this could look like things from H.R. Geiger all over. There's like skeletal patterns and building on things. They look straight out of Alien. Looks awesome. Doesn't look Klingon, right? I think is what I would say. Trekkies are stubborn. We don't like change. We don't like things to change what we already knew. That's a well-established thing, right? Like, people complained about the Romulan bird of prey in Picard looking updated because it didn't look just like the smooth plastic one from the 1960s. Okay. It's the same ship. It's very clearly the same ship, just a little bit more detailed. It's just a better model. Calm your tits, right? But
yeah,
nope, that
it was
is not
a budget
the kind of
thing.
approach people had. Yeah, that's not the approach people had.
Right.
And I don't think it's a budget thing to say that the TNG era Klingons updated to look like the Discovery era Klingons just based on budget. That one doesn't make sense to me. Same thing for the Andorians and Enterprise. We got these fully animatronic antennas on Shran that were fantastic. Shran was one of the best characters on the show, but when we see the Andorians in Discovery and in Strange New Worlds, their antennae are strangely stiff and non-emotive, not emotive, right? So, like, they may look cooler, but they don't necessarily perform better. Like, we had the same problem with the Klingon actors. Their mouths were so mushed by all the prosthetics and the teeth that it was harder to follow them, even if you spoke Klingon, right? So I think it really was just a drive to look different, at least in my opinion. And I think that bit them in the butt, and that's why they've backed out of basically all the changes that they made to the Klingons. The Klingons in that Strange New Worlds now are looking a lot more like Worf than they are like L'Rell, right? Same thing for their armor and their ships and their guns, all of it.
You're right about that. The Klingon High Council scene in the series premiere of Discovery, they had a chance, an opportunity right there to where everyone would have just been like, okay, yeah, cool. These are the African Klingons, and the ones we'd always seen before were the American Klingons. Whatever.
I don't quite like that phrasing for it, but I get what you're getting at. Yeah.
Okay, that could have been the Russian Klingons. I don't know. I'm not good at analogy or anything, but you get what I'm saying.
I do.
They had a chance to show that council with the different ones, but they try to pass it off as, oh no, this is actually
this is Klingon.
Yes, which couldn't fly with that. And I wonder if part of it is because the whole plot with Ash Tyler and Vok, that the makeup had to be so drastically different that you could not tell that they were the same actor. For example, Michael Dorn, you can recognize him in and out of the makeup as Worf. And but some of the other
Ash Tyler is a little bit harder. Yeah, I see your point.
Yeah,
but like I said, they could have just gone with this explanation of like, these are the Klingons that are of an ancient breed or an ancient sect that the Herc genetically manipulated to be better laborers, and that's why they have this sarcophagus ship that looks like nothing else we've seen. Mm-hmm. But then when they decided to make it so that all Klingons look like them and all the ships are these new designs, that's where I think they overstepped.
Yeah.
But I really want to hear what Bill thinks about this whole thing, because it looked like he was nodding along a bit.
Well, yeah, I think they changed everything in Discovery, not just the Klingons, but I know even for the Federation starships design, the edict from Brian Fuller when he first began the show as the showrunner was he did not want round nacelles. No reason given, just that he didn't want round nacelles. So basically they put round pegs at the end of a square tube, and that's why all the engines and all the ships, Federation ships, are square. Was because he did not want round engines. And they don't match anything prior to or after that. They just kind of forget that design aesthetic ever happened. Now suddenly Enterprise flies in with round nacelles, and it's been round nacelles ever since in Strange New Worlds. And you never see a square engine ship again, except in Discovery, or if you go back to an older Discovery episode. But even like uniforms, all that stuff aboard ship was, I think, designed specifically to be different. That was just the way that the production was designed and told to do. Not meant to fit our versions of canon and Star Trek. We can try to make it fit as best we can, but it's really all about art direction and what someone else wants to reimagine Star Trek to look like for their TV show.
I think that the Star Trek Online team actually managed to do a pretty good job of trying to add them back into canon, right? They talked about how like designs of this era were working off a slightly different propulsion model than the others. That's why all the nacelles look different, why they're so long. Like they wrote up this whole blog post why when they were bringing these ships into the game to explain that discontinuity, I thought they did a pretty good job. They mostly came from one design house out of like Beta Eridani or something. I don't remember. But like they tried to make it work. And when it comes to like the ship's nacelles all looking weird and the fact that their hull plating doesn't match with TOS era stuff at all, like I can see the logic behind it just being a different design house came up with most of the designs, and that's what perpetuated during that era. I can follow that because they still look mostly Starfleet. The Hoover class, all those designs, they can still be pretty interpreted as Starfleet. It's harder with the Klingon ones. They just looked...
They were the Fords, not Chevrolets?
No, it's more like comparing like an F1 race car to like your cousin's beat up pickup truck. That's kind of the difference there for the Klingons. Like, you just wouldn't assume they're the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Oh, Bill, I just wanted to ask you as we wrap up here, are there any social media links, projects, things that you want to just talk about to promote or advertise about that you're working on right now that you would like our audience to hear?
Well, I post on my Instagram account, which is, I think, Admiral Buck. Twitter is Buck Admiral. And my Facebook is just Bill Krause at Facebook. And I post projects that I'm currently in progress of working on. And I'm building another Enterprise G for a client. He asked me to build him one to get ahead of the line. I have basically an 18-month wait list of people who have commissioned me to build them their projects for. And I haven't closed my commissions because I just have so many that I simply just cannot, maintain that list. But I'll be posting some work of that Enterprise G putting together, again, the posters, which Renzo showed, but I've got some more of those coming up for sale this week. I'll be posting those up for availability on those 3 websites. And that's about it. I guess the Tornado will be coming out later this year, as well as a large Radiant, which will also be lit for another client. And those are my 2 fall projects following the Enterprise G.
I look forward to seeing them myself. Your work is always super impressive. So,
thank you,
and thank you for being on here with us. We really appreciate the time that you took, and we'll
appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely, we'll let you go so you can enjoy the rest of the evening. And anything we can ever do for you to help you out and help you promote anything or bring attention to anything, just let us know, and we're there to help. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can support us at patreon.com/BeyondTrek.
We are Beyond Trek Podcast. Lower your inhibitions and surrender your years. We will add inspirational and hilarious Trek content to your day. Your attention will adapt to subscribe to us. Resistance is futile.